control over it, really.
Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order. This is a special meeting of the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for July 13, 2011. We have one item of business we need to consider. It is a height variance, and it is application Z11034 by Mr. Steve Wade, requesting a 7-foot variance of the 35-foot maximum permitted building height in order to allow a 42-foot tall structure in a residential single-family RS-10 zone. And this is for property located at 1012 East Main Street, which is along the south side of East Main Street, east of First Avenue and west of 2nd Avenue. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. As you know, this is a special meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. Wade had requested a special meeting, and so we are meeting here today to discuss his height variance. And the reason why he requested a special meeting was so that in order for him to be able to be placed on the Historic Zoning Commission's agenda for next Tuesday, if he had waited until the regular Board of Zoning Appeals meeting on the 27th, it would have delayed him a month in going to the Historic Zoning Commission, and so that is why he made the request for the special meeting. Mr. Wade has been to the Historic Zoning Commission on several occasions to have a preliminary review of his plans, and one of the things that that those meetings yielded was the fact that his proposed chimneys were above the 35-foot maximum permitted building height in the RS-10 zoning district. And to orient you a little bit, before we get started talking about that, if we could pull up the aerial. There is this vacant lot here in the middle of the block between 1st and 2nd Avenue on the south side of East Main Street. It's about a block and a half west of Middle Tennessee Boulevard, zoned RS-10, and it's also in the Historic Zoning District. As I mentioned, it's vacant. Mr. Wade would like to build new construction, a new single-family residence on the subject property. And you have the plot plan that Site Engineering Consultants prepared for Mr. Wade. You'll see here is his proposed residence. There's a detached garage and a pool in the back and a circular driveway up front. We've looked at this plan for additional variances, and no additional variances are required. He comes in at just below the 25% maximum lot coverage, so he meets the maximum lot coverage requirement. Also, you'll notice that there are two protrusions on the east side of the house into the 10-foot side setback. One is a bay window, and the other is one of his chimneys. Mr. Wade knows that there are certain limits that they can protrude from the exterior wall into the setback, and after doing the calculations, it appears that they will be within those allowances that our zoning ordinance gives, but he is committed to making sure that he does not need variances on the bay windows and the chimney, and the chimney as far as it protrudes into the setback. The only thing that he actually does need a variance for is the height of the chimneys themselves. And before you, you've got a large set of building elevations that he has submitted. Those are actually a little bit dated. The newer copies of those are the 8.5 by 11s in your agenda package, which show a little greater level of detail. And you'll see that the two chimneys which frame the house, frame the main part of the house, are a little bit under 42 feet tall. The maximum permitted building height in the RS-10 zoning district is 35 feet. So he has requested a 7-foot variance of that maximum permitted building height in order to allow the chimneys at the height that is shown. The actual, even though the ridge of the house, if we could go back to the, there we go, the ridge of the house is around 38 feet tall or so. That actually, it's still, the main part of the house still meets the maximum permitted building height, because the way that we measure building height for a hip roof like this would be the midway point between the ridge of the roof and the eave, which falls at about 32 or 33 feet, which is within the 35-foot maximum permitted building height. So were it not for the chimneys, no height variance would be needed. So really all that Mr. Wade is requesting is a variance for those two chimneys of 7 feet. And I'll just show you a few of the other elevations. And you can see on both of these side elevations, you see the chimneys. And this is the rear elevation of the house. One thing you'll notice in the area, there are some chimneys that appear to be comparable to what Mr. Wade is proposing. In fact, you'll notice on the plot plan prepared by SCC that the house next door, the chimney height is approximately 41.5 feet above grade. Now I've got some photographs to show you. This is a picture of Mr. Wade's currently vacant lot. And these are some of the other houses in the immediate vicinity. You can see the chimney of this house just barely back here, sticking above the ridge. Here's another house with chimneys you can see right there.
Matthew, are any of these houses you're showing pictures of the house that's in this site plan by chance? Just curious.
You know, and I am trying to recollect. Is it the one that's on the board right now, Rob? Okay. Mr. Lewis has confirmed that the one that we have up right now is the one that's next door.
Okay.
This is the house that's actually next door on the other side, on the west side, and you can see it's considerably shorter than on what's on the east side. And so is the house that's on the corner of, this is the southeast corner of Main and First. So this would be two houses down from Mr. Wade's property. But across the street, you'll see that there are also some houses that, this one I don't think, this is Mr. Ward's home, Robert? I don't think the chimney protrudes higher than the ridge of the roof, but you can see it right there. And this is another one across the street. There's the chimney.
Matthew, isn't there some code that requires the chimney to be above the roof line? I mean, why are the chimneys so high?
I know that Mr. Lewis, does that? I know that you and Mr. Thompson, the chairman of the Historic Zoning Commission, had some discussion with the applicant about that. If you'd like, Mr. Lewis could.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay.
Robert Lewis in the Planning Department. There is a code in the building codes that says that the chimney has to be at least 10 feet away when it's a certain amount of feet from the roof, and that this is in keeping with that code. And I don't know exactly the dimensions. It's 2 feet out and 10 foot up, or I'm not sure, but it does meet those codes.
But there's a certain height that this chimney has to be if it's X amount of feet from the roof line, is that right?
Right.
And so has this chimney been built up then? Is it in excess of that? Or
You can go above
can it be
it.
shortened
It
and
just
still?
can't be shorter.
Okay, this chimney cannot be shorter. If it was shorter, it would be out of compliance with the code.
It probably would. I don't know. If it was shorter, I'd have to look at the dimensions. I'm not even sure. But as it is right now, it's up above, and it would be. It's fine with the codes, and I don't have an answer for that. I don't know.
And I apologize, Chairman Rogers, I don't have that information either.
If it was shorter, I don't know how much shorter it could be, but
Right.
I think part of what the Historic Commission was looking at was it was in keeping with the design of the house. If it was shorter than the roof line or brought into codes, it wouldn't look exactly the way it should be as far as the Historic Commission was looking at.
Well, the reason I asked that is that one house next door, the chimneys are above the roof line. Now, there are other photographs that we have, specifically that one, where the chimneys are lower than the roof line. And I think there's one other one in here. I don't think we're getting into it from an aesthetic standpoint like the Historic Commission does, but I was just curious about, why they're built so high, and is it necessary?
And I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question. We could endeavor to get someone from our Building and Codes Department down here to answer that question.
Aesthetically, it's a gorgeous house. But I'm just curious. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
Oh, that's okay. And certainly, if you'd like, I could attempt to reach Mr. Holtz or Mr. Whitaker in the Building and Codes Department and see if they could come down here and address that question.
It's not that big a deal to me. I was just thinking you might have an answer off the cuff, but unless the board wants to hear that, I'm content with going forward.
And I apologize for not having that information.
That's all right. No worries.
And one thing that you will find in your agenda packages, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we had before we went to the Board of Zoning Appeals is, I knew that the opinions of the Historic Zoning Commission would be of value to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So the Historic Zoning Commission has already looked at the height of the chimneys, and I asked Robert to take that height to them and see if the Historic Zoning Commission felt that it was in keeping with the aesthetics of the Historic Zoning District. And you'll see a memo from Mr. Lewis as well as a draft of the minutes from the last Historic Zoning Commission meeting in which they felt that it was in keeping with the aesthetics of the Historic Zoning Commission or the Historic Zoning District, and that it would have no negative impact on the surrounding area. And so they did put that in the form of a motion. Because Mr. Wade himself admits in his agenda package that this is, in the standards and proof that we look at in the zoning ordinance, this, he admits that this is more for aesthetic reasons rather than for hardship reasons, and so that's why he's brought this to you today, because he's trying to come up with a workable plan that will meet his needs as well as satisfy the Historic Zoning Commission. If the board approves this height variance request, staff recommends the following condition. Written confirmation from a surveyor must be provided that the chimney does not exceed the variance granted by the board, and that would be prior to a certificate of occupancy on the house itself. Mr. Lewis, as you know, is here if you have any questions with regards to the Historic Zoning Commission and their review of the house, and Mr. Wade is here as well if you have any questions for him.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Mr. Wade, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Yeah. First of all, thank y'all for coming to the special meeting. I know your guys' time is valuable, and I appreciate you guys being able to do that. Just to clear up, I may be able to clear up some of the issues of your question, Mr. Rogers, on the chimney height itself. If you look at the top ridge on the front elevation, I think there's two issues. First of all, it's a double. It is aesthetics, but these are also full masonry chimneys, so they have to be functional. And in order for the chimney to draw, it has to be really about 2 feet above that top ridge, so that the chimneys will actually draw. The other thing is, if I understand it correctly, if you look at that top ridge also, it's kind of extended. It almost looks like a mansard roof on there on the front elevation. You know, so that top ridge is a little longer than it would normally be. So I think that's where the 10 feet comes in. If that chimney is further than 10 feet from the end of the ridge, then the chimney can be lower than that and it'll still draw. So I guess there's a dual reason for that. Number one, we obviously want the full masonry chimneys to draw, and the other would be the aesthetic portion of that.
And these chimneys are closer to the ridge line than 10 feet, I guess.
They are, that's correct. And that's because that top ridge board has been extended to give it that mansard look. It's kind of a French architectural detail that's been placed on the house.
Okay. I noticed in the site plan, the driveway looks like the circle driveway looks like it comes over on your neighbor's property.
On the west side of the property, that is actually a shared drive. And that was something that became an issue with the Historic Commission as far as a circular drive. So we had to address that issue in detail. So you are correct. It does that drive that's showing going down the west side of the property half of it is on my property, half of it is on the Reeves property to the west. That's correct.
Is there a recorded easement for that?
There is. There's a recorded easement on both properties. The properties were originally one lot, and then if the lot goes deeper, the lot that I bought was cut off. I think they called it Lot 1 and Lot 2 in the deed. So when they cut off that larger lot that goes deeper than the Reeves property, then when they cut it off, the existing drive of the Reeves property to the west, a portion of it was on what they refer to as Lot 1. So therefore, that is a shared drive, and that was one of the reasons the Historic Commission was able to accept the circular drive, because of the hardship of parking downtown and the fact that it's a shared drive and just for parking, for parking reasons. Because you can't park on a shared drive or you block it. So it's basically an access to a space that you can utilize, so you can actually park on that.
Okay.
That clears that up.
Deal. Any other questions for Mr. Wade? All right. Thank you, Mr. Wade. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, anything you want to add in addition?
Other than what Matthew said about the Historic Commission approving the aesthetics and the compatibility of the chimneys, there are many houses along Main Street that are probably even taller with chimneys than this house, and they didn't see any problems with this one being, requesting a variance at this height.
Deal. Any questions for Mr. Lewis? All right. Thank you. And at this time, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the height variance, subject to staff comment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Wade, that application's been approved. And like I said earlier, it looks like a gorgeous house. Really eager to see it constructed, and I'm confident it's going to be a real nice addition to that East Main Street area. Good. Thank you. All right. Staff reports and any other business?
Just a reminder that we have our regularly scheduled meeting on July 27th at 1 p.m. here in the council chambers.
All right. We're all looking forward to that. As always. That's right. No. All right. Well, if there's no other business, then we're adjourned.